And together driving.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the International Youth Conference IYC Africa Regional Online Session. Today, our focus will be African Youth and Agenda 2063, the way forward. It's really a pleasure to be here with everybody. We've had a packed IYC for the last couple of days, and there's no way that we could go finish this IYC platform without hearing from African youth, hearing the voices from the continent. As I mentioned today, we want to focus on the African Union 2063. If you want to know what you know about the African Union Agenda 2063, what are your thoughts in terms of the role of young people in pushing this framework forward on the continent? So I'm joined today with a great team. I didn't even introduce myself. Most people know me as Auntie Hawa, but for those who don't, I am Hawa Taylor Kamara Diallo, and it's a privilege for me to be part of IYC. And once again, it's always a treat for me to engage and to hear from youth on the continent. So I'm really excited to hear, what you guys have to say. And I'm going to be joined in moderating this session with one of my colleagues, a good family member, Abdul Buyukasenge, who's a PhD student in the University of Warsaw in Poland. He's also a program coordinator for the IBTK Foundation. So why don't we go around the screen and we can have everybody introduce themselves, and then I will very proudly hand over the mic to Abdul, who will take us through the rest of the session. So most of you know that I retired last week from the UN, but that I'm joining you in civil society, and that for the last 3 decades I've worked as the chief of the civil society unit in the UN Department of Global Communications. And it's been my passion really to uplift the voices of young people all around the world. But of course, hailing from Sierra Leone, West Africa, proudly, I have a special place for all young people, but especially for young people from the continent, and really have this desire to work alongside with them in terms of making sure that young people are front and center in all decisions, policy making, and all things that are African. Why don't we start with you, Abdul? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Auntie Howard. So it's a great pleasure to be here with the young Africans. So today is African Day, as we recently celebrated African Day globally. And I think there in New York, in America, you did so, and also here in Warsaw, we did. But unfortunately, I did not participate there. So today it's about a tough talk, let's say real talk about Africa. So the Africa we want, how do we want this Africa to be? So we wanted to hear about the vision that you have. Not only the African Union has a vision, what about us youth, young people? What kind of vision do we have towards our continent? So how do we do that? So for me to be able to understand and also try to learn from each other and also learn from me and others, we need to share some question. And it's like open-ended question that you have to apply, and your theories and practices that you feel really could be applied to Africa. And then we see whether the Africa we want is the real one or maybe it's not true. So if we look at the Agenda 2063, it's more about to say that the Africa really we want. How do we want it? Is it achievable? And then if it's achievable, how we're going to achieve it? Yet, Chess, if you want to come to Kenya, he needs a visa. He needs to pay money, yet he's in African continent. So I think this is something that we really need to look at and see why do we have conflict in our regions, not only in Africa, but also in our neighboring countries. Let's see, for example, Europe. How did they achieve to make the European Union more strong and let's say a strong institution that can tackle all these problems that they had during the World War One and World War Two? What about Africa for decades since 1960s when we had this, when we celebrated our independences? Because most of African countries celebrate their independence in 1960s, but still we still have problem. What about Sudan? What about Congo? What about Somalia? So these are the things that we need to see, and nowhere else have ever seen coup d'etat. It's only in Africa. So you young people, young generation, the future of Africa. I want to ask you a question, and I say, for example, if I go to chess and I say, for example, the African Union Agenda 2063 is relevant to work of youth and platform. How do you think this agenda could be achieved without, let's say, without this emotion, say that it's achievable? How can we achieve the African Union Vision 2063, yet we're not there yet? I mean, as an expert, how do you think if you were to be asked about this issue?
Thanks so much, Abdul. But maybe Chase, before you continue, why don't we welcome everybody to the platform? I see we've been joined by Cristobal Atieno Pudo Omondi from Nairobi. Cristobal, again, thanks for staying up with us. So Abdul, let's have a quick rundown so everybody can tell us about themselves, and then we'll dive right back to Chase for that really heavy question you just posed to him. Why don't we go over to Cristobal since you just joined us? Tell us a bit about yourself, Cristobal.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Auntie Hawa. All the way from Nairobi. It's almost heading to midnight, but we are still here championing what we know best how to do. I'm a director for an event management company, and I'm also a youth advisor in one of the youth group that is concerned with working on leadership and governance activities. I mentor them mostly on a mental health perspective and also giving them guidance on the programs that they're having. Thanks so much. Over to you, Abdul.
Thank you, Cristobal. Thank you for joining us, and I hope that Kenya is a great country. I think that we have a role to play, and also young people from Kenya, they do have a role to play not only in Africa but globally. So I can also go to my sister over there. Then you see what we can say that about in Cameroon. How do we talk about it, and how do we introduce ourselves? Thank you.
So hi everyone, my name is Velvita Viban. Everybody calls me V in case you forget. All my names start with V, by the way. So if you're looking for a V in Africa and you just say V, I'm most likely going to be the one they're going to pick up. But I am a gender and digital inclusion advocate. I have been a serial volunteer, like I like to call myself, working a lot on youth development issues across different areas. And I do run a nonprofit also called I'm Human, and we do alternative learning support programs and gender inclusion programs, especially for women and children from conflict affected regions. I have happened to work in the slums of Ajegunle, Lagos. I have a Nigerian here, and yeah, those are one of the hardest places I've had to work in. But besides working in Cameroon, I have been to Kenya, Christabel. So yeah, I mean, I like to call myself a Pan-African, someone who's very passionate about, driving change across our institutions, but most importantly on the ground. So I like to call myself a grassroots militant. And yeah, I'm happy that we're having a conversation about youth involvement and how we can work as young people, regardless of the institutions, regardless of the policies that already exist around us. But how are we as young people actually driving the change that we want to see in the communities in which we reside? So I'm really excited to be on this conversation. And I'm glad Auntie Hawa put together our Africa regional session, because again, we're talking about change across the globe. Everybody's looking at the African continent. I mean, the continent is going to be in a couple of years to come have the youngest population. So of course, we already know that if we're talking about youth issues, we do need to be talking about the issues that concern us, because whether we like it or not, our issues will affect the global, the scale at large. So again, I'm excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to answering some of the tough questions. Hopefully I have some answers.
Great. Thank you very, very much. We need people like you. That's why we need Africa. We need vibrant young people to make sure the Africa we want will be achievable. So I think if I may go, just not from Cameroon, I can immigrate a bit to somewhere I can see my brother Success, whom his name is Success. So how do we succeed in implementing the Agenda 2063 from Nigeria? Over to you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Success. I work in business and international finance consulting. I'm also a human development facilitator at Broad Heart. Um, I think that, for me, I think when it comes to whatever it is that has to do with implementation, I am more about get your hands dirty, get out there and do something. It doesn't have to be large scale. It just has to be that you're doing something. And I like that Velvita mentioned that she works in a drug. I smiled really wide when she said that because I also did a slum project in Abuja in 2019, and I know what it means, like to work to do projects in the slum areas. Literally came back from Nigeria last week, and I was telling on Tower how our car got stuck because we were going to like a rural area to talk about SDGs. And but what I am looking forward is, rubbing minds, not just about eloquence or properly putting words together, because we know how to do that in Africa. Young people in Africa are educated. And so, but what I'm looking towards is really us having access to implement the things that we're talking about. And because by 2063, a lot of us will be dead. Um, so it's really what we're able to do now to secure the future for our offsprings, and so that we're able to at least be a part of the evolution, the positive evolution that's going to happen in Africa. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. So, if I look at your left, I see my brother from Nigeria, but I'm not going to ask him about Wakanda thing. Then I'll go to ambassador down here. So, when you're becoming an ambassador, so it means you are presenting someone, you are presenting a country, you're presenting a community. How are you tackling the problem that we are facing, like in Africa? For example, when you're bringing your voice to the table and try to articulate the interests of young people globally, because you travel America, Europe, Africa, everywhere. So it means you are going there with a mission to articulate, present, and also try to, to make people understand about Africa. You're an ambassador of Africa, not only about Sierra Leone, but I think it's a great time for you to also tell us what you think if this Vision 2063 is achievable. Is it achievable? How? In which way? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this global stage. I want to salute everybody here present, to the audience who are watching from across the continent. And I want to assure them that we as Africa, we have our mandate, we have our own timeline. That is why we work together with the authorities at B and strategize a document we call Agenda 2063. Of course, the rest of the world is moving towards 2030, but we have been far behind in terms of projecting ourselves development-wise, projecting ourselves in terms of infrastructure, projecting ourselves in terms of creating any sustainable systems. Because without systems, you cannot run anywhere. The reason why we see the Europeans are well organized today, they have the Asians, and as well as the Americans, is because they have effective systems which are not being manipulated by individuals as to their convenience while they're in office. The dictate of the American laws has been there for a century now, and any head of state that comes to office, we understand that these are precedents he has to follow, or he moves away from that particular trajectory. But the bottom line with Agenda 2063, as African continent, we need to consolidate the unity amongst ourselves. A divided house can never stand. And that has been a problem for Africa over the ages. We have seen trailblazers who have tried to break this syndrome, but it is still happening and it is still reoccurring. So it is incumbent on us, the upcoming generation from the continent, to take it upon ourselves to ensure that whatever we do in sincerity for development of the continent itself, in upholding the principles of the African Union Charter, the AU 2063 agenda, we must ensure we do it to the accomplishment of future generations on that continent. And that can be achievable only when we come together first and put all other agendas aside and say this is for Africa. It can never be accomplished with we feeling I'm Anglophone or somebody else feeling he or she's Francophone or somebody's feeling he or she's from Portuguese. And we have seen how the continent is being scrambled for. Before now, we only had colonial masters such as England, France, scrambling for Africa. Now we have China. Now we have Russia. We have other member states who are invading our resources. The reason they are accomplishing these charges is because we ourselves cannot acknowledge that we can do things with little or no external support. We have to increase the value chain of the continental value that we have. We should be proud of the Africanness that we carry, not only to speak luxuriously in conferences or give tangible statements, but we should do it in our action. Now we have the free Africa, the AfTAC, which is the Free Continental Trade Agreement. How can I go to Nigeria and say, success, I want to buy Agbada, I want to buy it in your local currency and come back to Sierra Leone and sell? Instead of me saying I need to buy it from him when he's in America. So because it's now in America, it has more American value than it should be in Africa. These are the simple things that can boost our economies. We see what I keep saying this COVID-19 was a reset button for the entire continent and the entire world. We had the opportunity to catch up with the world, and we still do, because the entire world is looking to us for at least 70% of their external resources to run their economies. We saw what the coup d'etat leaders are doing currently in the Francophone states, and we saw what happened when Niger took a voice against France for one of their major minerals, which is an essential commodity for them to get light in France. Why aren't we using these technologies and these minerals to revitalize energy supply across the continent? If we have the Great Falls, which can have more electrical supply through hydro, why won't the member states along that region benefit from this particular facility? Why can't we synergize instead of we waiting for external contributing factors such as the Chinese bank, Islamic Development Bank to come to our aid? And Africa should realize, if I am trying to tell anybody, for instance, Antihawa giving me this platform to be here, IYC giving me the platform, I must prove myself to be competent to be on the table. And me being on the table is bringing a wealth of experience and something that can be of added value. Too long, we have been giving added value, which has been undervalued, because what we are crying for is aid. Somebody comes to your country, dress up kids in a local slum, market it, put it on international news, and think that's the perception of Africa. That is not Africa. Afrobeat, which has been a major instrument from the Nigerian community, has been a phenomenon which is now spreading wide across the globe. Just music alone has exposed the continent to the rest of the world, and people are flocking in. If today we can see people like Davido doing collabo with Chris Brown and American citizens, because Nigerians put in the hard work. But what we promote more for Nigeria is the corruption. What we promote more for Nigeria is not that they have currently the biggest oil refinery in the whole world, but the fact that they have the most corrupt members of governance system. Everywhere you have corruption. In America, I saw broken roads. I saw roads that are not properly fixed. But we market the negativity of our continent more than the success stories. And if you cannot influence the upcoming generation to have the appetite to stay on the continent, everybody wants to fly out, because that's what we have been told. You cannot make it on the continent, and it is happening so. So it is incumbent on us that we take up the Agenda 2063 mandate and run with it with the consciousness that it is our property, it is our vision, and nobody's going to make Africa great the way we want to say it. Nobody, not Asia, not America, not Russia. Currently, our heads of state are currently in Korea. The first time ever now, Korea is having Korea Africa Summit. How many times have we thought it that we should bring these heads of state, Russia president, Korea president, China president, all of them to Africa and sit them down and tell them what we want to do? We're always flying to them to discuss our future. Have we seen the revised psychology in some of these simple things that we do, and how belittling we belittle ourselves, and then we point fingers, and then we say they're not taking us seriously? Antihawa stood out strong for this session to hold, because the Pan-African in her is saying, why is there other session going on, and then there's little or no preparations for African session? I want to see the session go on today. And she made it a point of duty to keep each and every one of us on our tabs, via phone calls, via message, via emails, that we are supposed to be here to discuss the prospect of Agenda 2063 for our continent. I like to take life as it comes, the simplicity, the everyday things that we do. That's what counts. That's where you start the change. I cannot be telling anybody here on this call, or on this Zoom meeting, or anyone looking from any part of the world to say, be the change, if I am not taking an action. I need to be accountable to myself first and accountable to my society. And back to the moderator with his question, me amplifying the continent's representation means I have to deliver as expected of me in person and make sure the targeted agendas of my nation in terms of development wise is become accomplished with whether in the immediate term, the long term, or short term. It is incumbent on me to say Sierra Leone need foreign direct investment. So if I'm telling an investor to come to invest in Sierra Leone, I have to showcase what I have done on my own without the investor's foreign direct investment or his venture capital. There and then they will say, okay, this gentleman is up to something, and we can see how we can improve on an existing or large scale, upscale his existing investment opportunities. But over time, Africa has always been begging. We should get up from our knees. We have been on our knees for too long. Look at the way Gaddafi set up Libya, and look at how Africa themselves sat down and Libya destroyed itself. You were born in a country where you, from age 0 to 18, you don't need to pay tax. Government is taking care of your feeding, your accommodation, your education. And then you say this man is not fit for office. He's one man who has cleared the bills and debts of member states without even making a noise about it or going to any AU or UN meeting to say this is what I need. But yet still we cannot rally around ourselves when we have crises as member states. We cannot be true to ourselves. What does that make sense? And until we unify and we stop this segregation amongst ourselves as Africans, I'm sorry, we'll keep talking, and I'm tired of talking. I just want to see action. And action, it might be small. It might be in a small community with my sister in Kenya. It might be in my small community in Kokulbe in Sierra Leone. That's where I'm from. So start from where you are and let that be a reference point that, okay, this is where he started and this is where he went to. Dangote has proven it beyond all reasonable doubt that it can happen. You can use the foreign resources to enlarge or expand on existing infrastructure development that can be of benefit to you. For that man to be the wealthiest African on the planet, it comes at a great cost. But for him to go to the African CEOs conference in Rwanda and tell us that for him to go to 34 member states of this very continent that he is proudly from, son of the soil, he has to get visa. That is so absurd. These are the things we are doing to ourselves that we are so not considering as impediment. You don't see that amongst the Europeans. It's not even happening with the American passport, not to talk of Asia. So we need to add value to ourselves. And nobody's going to give you value if you don't have something concrete to bring to the table.
Thank you so much,
That's my submission.
Ambassador Unisa, for really those really valid points. As a strong African woman, I'm going to cut in because I know we have lots of people that are around the screen. Yeah. I value everything that you're saying, and you're really speaking to the point. Some of the questions, that we're thinking about that we have really in store for everybody. But really, thank you for framing that, those challenges, those opportunities, those do's and those don'ts, and those whys, because those are questions that I had, I think, even for myself. I think that everybody has introduced themselves.
No, I haven't.
Yes,
I haven't.
Finish. I know that youth in Africa are very strong and powerful, but guess what? So are African women as well. So please give me the opportunity to to come back to you, my firstborn, Chase. I was about to say that I will pivot back to you so that you can go ahead and introduce yourself. Mm-hmm. And as you're introducing yourself, the burning question I have to ask young people, and I think all of us as Africans, as well as our colleagues and friends who are in the chat, is Africa being left behind? If so, why? Over to you, Chase.
Thank you so much. Good evening or good day, distinguished excellencies and amazing social innovators, non-profit leaders that are on the call today. I can only remember the mosquito bite from Nairobi, making me remember my motherland. And when the power was off, somebody reminded me, like, you first must remember that you're an African, But most of us, when we've tasted the good side of the Western world, we tend to want to forget home. But truly reflecting on the fact that it's an honor to be speaking at this youth regional-led session.
Chase, I think you might have two mics that are open.
No, I only have one mic open, yeah. So maybe someone else who is not speaking can mute. Is it good now? Yeah, so my name is Chase. They call me the Pad Man. I started originally from Lagos, Nigeria, which Viben mentioned earlier, from the slums of Makoko to the rest of Mushin, homegrown city, where we're going from community to community, sharing sanitary pads, educating men in the conversation. So I call myself a man championing menstrual movement, making the global goal famous to ending period poverty. I've also been able to get some awards like the Manivia African Award for Social Change, the African Achievement Award in Los Angeles, which is actually making us show the essence of engaging in UN and outside UN initiatives on making the African continent proud. Jogged in my role also as an entrepreneur and writer, where I've written to famous book, The Period Passport, and Bomisi, which is a story around an African immigrant journey. One of the answers to Abdul's introduction first was, even the African wealthiest man has trouble traveling in his own continent. Despite doing business in multiple countries, Aliko Dangote has to also submit bank statement. Recently I was trying to apply for a France visa and I had to be calling the consul to even get an appointment date. It just shows how much fact young people are trying to do a lot of social work in the ecosystem. But as African be left behind, I wouldn't say no, and I would also say yes. But the question is, how do we become part of that conversation in the pivotal moment of history? Like recently, we celebrated African Day, and people will still ask, is it worth celebrating? Yes, Africa is worth celebrating because we have African tech superstars on the continent. My brother Yunus has mentioned Afrobeat as a tool. But the question is, what are these technology that are helping to solve immediate problems? What are the technology that has been created to solve reproductive health issues, climate health issues? We're talking about sources who have gone into community using this tool. How do we make tools that are relevant that people can engage with? During the recent trip to UN Civil Society in Nairobi, we paid courtesy visit, and on those calls that we had with the director for the United Nations in Nairobi, and also making sure that we met the ambassador of Sierra Leone. But we're talking about how much more do we follow through on this conversation to be able to lead on driving impact initiative. There's so many problems that we're dealing with Africa. There's so many times we're going to talk about what the government is not doing, but how do we change our statement? And I believe this conversation should be able to guide us through the solutions that we can provide. How do we create better directive to lead this conversation better? I think I will stop on that point for now.
Thank you very much, brother. Thank you, thank you, thank you. See, we have a lot of ideas, a lot of visions, but we need to come together. How do we have like a strong African, let's say, network? All of us, we are in diaspora, and I think from diaspora point of view, we can create something that is really very, very big. So coming back to that, I think I do have some little question that I can ask my sister from Nairobi, and I want her to tell me something. How does she, because she's been working with the young people, with the youth in her community, and I think she can give us an insight on how she think that what is the role of African leaders can play in shaping the discussion and the outcome of this continent. And then when I ask this question, then I will also ask my brother Success and tell me, how do you think the African youth should have a role to play in framing this summit of the future and make sure that the youth voices from Africa are heard? And then what is the outcome in terms of development and also this Agenda 2063? And then, as you said, my sister from Cameroon also will try to help us also, if we are planning this way to achieve these goals, what kind of strategy can be employed to ensure that the development initiatives are sustainable and do not compromise the ability of future generation, that is sustainable development, let's say, and how do we cope with that? And I think there are three questions and answers can help us move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdul. And once again, hi, everybody. From Nairobi here, we are at nights, but it's always time that we can do something together. I echo the sentiments that my brother Unisa gave in terms of what are we currently doing and also what we can do to stop being on the sideline and blaming each other. Well, from where I come from, I've engaged a lot of young people, and I remember the program that I was engaged with before was a program whereby we had to work with young people in different communities, and that especially the informal settlements. It was great to see how young people have got, they bring in new perspectives. Remember when we did a needs assessment, we had to discover that every NGO, every organization goes into the informal settlement and offers them life skills, trainings, without even asking them, what do you want? Engaging them as partners in the program that they are undertaking. And this brought in a lot of duplication of work. And that is what we see up to today. Many programs, many activities, many interventions are being taken, but there is no consideration on what the role of the young African leader can play in shaping that discussion or even the outcome. So it's very important that the young leaders are engaged. And number one, we see they bring in fresh perspectives because they've been there going left, right, and center, knowing what is happening. They are already working on themselves. So there's a lot of innovative solutions that they're currently working for, be it in IT or through their career line, and they get quick and deep understanding of contemporary issues. So when the young people engage at that level, you can get dynamic young people that gives all the projects and programs a fresh perspective. I've had every time I have a group of young people, I'm taking them through mental awareness and just talking to them so that they get to know themselves. I hear of their cry. I hear of their demands, their sentiments. And when I was young at that age, it was not very easy for me to be more bolder and more open. But now you find that they are more aware of what is happening. They are more concerned and they want to be engaged. But if you lock them out, there is no fresh perspective that is received. There is no innovativeness. There is no understanding of the contemporary issues. They do a lot of research, even how they interact. So when the young people are actively engaged and they participate in even policy dialogues, advocating for inclusive and forward-thinking policies, not policies that are there to defend the grants and the contributions that we have brought in currently, but you find that they are thinking ahead of them. And this leads to a lot of grassroots movements and young leaders influencing decisions and which affect their future. So the involvement ensures that there's unique challenges and opportunities that even if young people are facing, they are adequately addressed both in continental and international forums. So we find that when you engage young people, there's a wider broad of what is received into the progress and the programs that is done. And I find it very interesting because a lot of young people are more united. I'm looking at what we are currently doing right now. We were easily united by one factor, but with each of us brought in very unique ideas at once and at one point to make things to push. When I was working in the United Nations some time back, we find that the young people in the different agencies, we used to meet during lunch and it was very easy for me to know what another agency is doing because my friend was working in that project. And that was the only way I could bring the idea to my bosses. And sometimes they will be so surprised that they were not even aware what the other agencies are getting involved until these young people who are hanging out together and sharing what they're doing in their projects will bring it in. And this fostered a lot of cooperation. It brought in a lot of partnership, and it even made it easy for organization to be able to penetrate certain areas because the sister organization or the partner organization is already inside that area addressing certain issues. So yes, young people they play a very crucial role. They bring a lot of freshness, innovative solutions, and deep understanding of contemporary issues when they're engaged in shaping the discussion and outcome of the continent Africa and even going outside to the other continents. Thanks you so much, Abdul.
Thank you, my sister. Success, the success for Africa. Do you want to read the question? Because I mean, it's really important, as you see with the experience of Christabel, how she was meeting young people, and then we said this sameness, this togetherness, and also united African youth. So this is actually what we, as we heard that our Auntie Hawa fought very much for us to have this platform, to have a say, and also try to discuss about our continent. So if we have, like, let's say 1 million people like us doing the same, don't you think that Africa will be very far from where we are today? And that's why I was asking you the question. I say, do African youth have a role to play in framing this summit of the future towards the policy framework, let's say global policy framework that is addressing the Agenda 2063? How does this summit of the future respond to our Agenda 2063, that is Africa? Because when you talk about summit of the future, it's a global one. And how does it respond to our needs like Africans?
Okay. So I'm just going to go forward, and I believe, I'm hoping that everyone that's watching or on this panel, we know that the Agenda 2063 was extrapolated from the SDGs. And most of the things that, like, some buzzwords, some keywords that's in this agenda is Summit of the Future, focusing on emerging trends, innovative technologies, sustainability, global collaboration for a brighter future. If everything I'm saying now does not tell you young people, young people, young people, I don't know what could. Because innovations are very, very related to young people. Emerging trends, very, very related. The future is going to be occupied literally by young people. And so, I feel like the Summit of the Future revolves around young people. It revolves around empowering young people to thrive in tomorrow's world. Now, I believe that one of the challenges that we faced is giving young people access to implement, to be a part of this process. I don't know if a few people, I think the only person here that was there last time when we talked about youth-led initiatives in Africa was Auntie Hawa. And, we talked about how young people could have an idea and go to get loans for it and get rejected just because they're young. But the older generation would go and get, projects approved easily and get funding for it. But I'm going to move forward and answer your question. And the answer to that is yes, African youth have a crucial role in frameworks like the Summit of the Future to ensure their perspectives are included in global policy frameworks. We're going to be part of policy dialogues. A lot of times, because we're young, because we are perceived as radical, we are not included in these decision-making processes. And what we have to, I don't even know if it's what we have to do or what we have to request or what we have to demand, because I feel like young people have shown from different aspects how versatile we can be in this being at the helm of affairs. And the keywords that we've just not been able to crack is access. We've had tokenism, a lot of it. We've had constantly people who say, oh, this person looks promising, let's bring him in. And then that person is just the person we show to the media and say he's part of us. But when we're actually making decisions, this person is not a part of it. So we want to actively engage in discussions and forums to voice our concerns and ideas and be part of advocacy for representation, where we push for youth representation in decision making, like I mentioned before, and very, very importantly, leverage digital platforms. And I think that's a very young people thing to do. We're using social media and other digital tools to mobilize and advocate for young people being a part of the conversation. One of the things that we did last year when we did the declaration, because I was a part of this media misinformation and disinformation drafts that we wrote. And you could see the juxtaposition of truth and PR that I think young people can leverage on. And Eunice was talking about Africans postulating the bad side of things as opposed to giving highlights to the good things happening. And media is perfect for that. We can also use it to push for even better outcomes in our decision making, because the more advanced generation in age are paying attention to social media much more than they were. And this could be a platform for us to force their hand, if I can use that phrase, to pay attention to the things that matter. Collaborating with global youth networks. One of the things I mentioned in Nairobi was, strengthening youth networks as that strong standalone software so that when they come together, they can, have seamless collaborations and strong collaborations. So providing insights and innovative solutions that address the unique problems found in different parts of our communities. Because, like Christopher mentioned, a lot of people come to, for instance, the slums and they go give them food. And then the next foundation comes, they go give them food and they give them healthcare. But these people probably don't necessarily need food, in quotes. They need relocation. So why can't we all, as those networks coming to work in these communities, come together? And for instance, I'm going to throw it out there. This is a project I'm actually currently trying to design. Container homes that are properly designed. Those are sustainable and cheaper than regular homes and easy to move along. You can transport them. So, we can work on projects like this together as opposed to, everybody just going to throwing, and those are good. It's good to go in and do the little you can, but it's greater when we all come together, to do something great. Do you want to say something or should I conclude?
Yeah, conclude so that I can pass over to others. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I think just in a nutshell, I think that having all these little drops of water as opposed to being a part of the mighty ocean is kind of affecting our civil society impact projects. And I think we need to take a step back and revitalize our plans and our blueprints. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Because I see here the audience, they say the International Youth Conference at OIC, we advocate for a visa-free Africa for Africans. We can't be restricted. We can't be restricted to visit our fellow brothers and sisters from all over Africa. So I think this is something that is very fundamental. It's a very quintessential element of discussion that we can see, but also we need to look at also how do people, because most of the people we have this human nature of self-interest because we are very egoistic. So if we see, for example, in South Africa, there are a lot of resources. It's where we all want to go. So if we do open the borders, everyone will want to go to South Africa to stay there instead of staying in Rwanda or maybe Sierra Leone. If there is something that really attracts people to go there, it's where people will go, and other countries will not have population. So coming back to the question of my sister VV, then we're saying that because we are looking at the Agenda 2063 and also Agenda 2030, that is UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So what strategy can be employed to ensure that development initiatives are sustainable and do not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their own needs on the continent? That is Africa, because if you are saying that we have Vision 2063, we also have Vision 2030, that is a SDG to be implemented, also achieved by then. How can we achieve the SDGs without being left behind? Thank you.
I'm actually glad that I spotted a comments that spoke about the free movement of persons, and when we're talking about Agenda 2030, Agenda 2063, most of the time I always ask myself, who set these targets? Who set these 2020? Who set 2030? who said 2063. Now, why am I asking? Of course, we require structure in all our planning and all of that. But if we're talking about, like the project management system that we sort of use, if we're actually being agile, how are we actually asking and questioning ourselves in the process of these goals? Like, what are the targets? I always ask myself, what are the implementation mechanisms that have been put in place? What is our target for like, okay, let's just say I'll use a clear example. And I always say most of the time when we talk about these agendas, we use the big terminology and people don't really get the big picture. Now, if I'm talking about 2030, for instance, if I was planning, say, I'm just calling it a birthday party, if I put it that way, you use fun words that young people actually, understand. If I'm planning a birthday party, what do I need to get by Monday? What do I need to get by Friday? What do I need to get by? Well, so who is doing what before Friday? Who is doing what before Saturday? And how am I checking to make sure that each of these institutions or whoever is in charge is actually doing what they're supposed to do? I don't think that I have clearly, from my end, seen, a clear pathway that kind of exposes who's doing what and who's responsible for what. And so that we can sort of adjust if there are any challenges along the lines. And I really like for us to move from a diplomatic standpoint or an institution-based approach to a people-based or a people-centric approach. Why am I saying this? We're talking about young people and we're talking about tokenism, how they'll pick a few of us today to come and talk. But the institutions represent just a fraction. And even the institutions have just a piece of number of employees that even represent the masses. So how then are we actually including young people in the process? And for me, if we're actually looking at achieving, just let's say, the SDGs, I remember when they started talking about the Millennium Development Goals. Now we're talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. Who knows what's coming next? Maybe the Summit of the Future is going to give us another name. So again, I feel like all these, these terminologies, these big names, the summits and all of that are fine. But we need to be able to break them down in a language that the people themselves feel concerned, the people themselves feel the need to input and actually work towards it. And I feel like we need to include young voices. For me, without, if we're trying to achieve this sustainable future without jeopardizing the process, how do we do it? There are multiple stakeholders. I always say, let's treat this, our African question, as a business. In a business, if I have a business and I say, by quarter 1, I need to have XYZ result. If you're not giving me results by quarter 1, you out. But I mean, that's a diplomatic conversation that cannot really work. So I feel like diplomacy is sort of, giving us a lot of bottlenecks that don't allow us to achieve these goals. And to include young people in the process is beyond just asking our opinions at the start of the process, say for the Summit of the Future, but include them in the review mechanisms. Are they young people who are actually coming to come and look at these mechanisms at the end of the day? Are we young people part of the reporting mechanisms? Are we actually asking our governments, okay, hi guys, I see we had planned to, plant 20 trees in this community. I think we're behind on time. So young people themselves will start taking charge and they will be part of the conversations that actually don't jeopardize the process because they know that this thing is going to affect me in the long run. Number 2 for me will probably be, investing in skill acquisition. We always hear that our young people are not ready to lead. There are just a few who have the skills, and that is a frustration. Whether we like it or not, young people are always complaining about the fact that, they don't have access. They're not given access, and the access because, they lack the skills. So what are we doing to make sure that we're preparing, even the future, the 15-year-olds, the 10-year-olds, what are we doing? Our school curriculums considering, some of those things? Are we putting in place mechanisms where people actually feel concerned about the democratic processes and voting? I come from a country where, trust me, when we talk about elections, every young person, at least the majority, looks aside like, okay, I'm not even sure I want to be concerned. But if we start giving people the chance to feel like they're part of the process, then it doesn't become a conversation of the institutions and the big goals, it becomes a problem of you as an individual, as a person, are not doing what you're meant to be doing to achieve those goals. That, in my way, is how I think we can achieve, sustainable future and make sure that we're not jeopardizing anyone in the process or affecting and ruffling feathers in the process as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my sister. So now, because we're talking about Africa issues, because we know Africa has been there for, let's say, for a long, long time, and most of our countries, they got their independence in 1960s, but why do we still have wars? Because when I see people in Somalia, people in Sudan, people in Chad, Central African Republic, Cameroon, people are just fleeing their country because of the insecurity. So we are having this problem for decades. So what kind of limitation these African intergovernmental organizations they have, like African Union, ECOWAS, Economic let's say East African Community, and then you can ask yourself, why do we have these? Are these institutions functional? Are they really active? Who are they? I mean, who are those leaders just leading the institutions? The people who are leading the African Union, ECOWAS, are they really influential? Who can take decisions that can really be positive for the continent? Because I mean, we do not understand why Africa is always at war. Why do we fight? Why do we fight? Because we said we are together, togetherness, sameness. Because people without speaking the language. Let's say you're coming from Nigeria, going to Kenya without speaking good morning, habari. Nobody will know that you're from Nigeria until you speak, which means that we are the same. The sameness is very important because we are differentiated about the language. It's about communitarians, people, the community, because if you don't speak the same language with us, then you're not ours. So you're not with us because you don't speak the same language. Because I don't know you speak English, then I don't know, this is Ugandan. I mean, this is the way people perceive Africa, because Africa is one, it's borderless. Let's say in mindset, that is Africa without borders. How can we live without these borders? How can we live? How can we intertrade? How can we interdepend on each other? Because you said, UNISA, before that, we are a dependable continent. Why do we need to depend on North Korea or South Korea? We need to depend on Russia. And why can't Russia also come to depend on us? It's because we are saying we are united, we citizens, but our continent, when you look at the countries, 55 countries, they are not really united, because I still need a visa to enter South Africa. I still need a visa to enter Egypt. I still need a visa to enter, I don't know, Cameroon. This is something that is not really okay for us. This is something that is really orthodox, let's say. It should be something that is really going with this, speed of the technology that we have, because we can track everything, security, terrorism, whatever. But I think we cannot kill each other because we hate each other. People, they do that because they lack some, let's say, education. They lack that harmony, love, and everything. So coming back to you, UNISA, which I will give you like 3 to 4 minutes with the chase, maybe will help us also understand, given the ongoing conflict in various regions in Africa, what concrete steps can the AU, the African Union, let's say also ECOWAS, whoever, African Intergovernmental Organization, can take to foster lasting peace and security across the continent? And how can member states be held accountable for implementing these measures? Because we know that they've been saying that for a long time, for decades. They say the Africa we want is the Africa that is peaceful, prosperous, and also interconnected. So why do we have these wars? Yes, yet we had already established this institution with really framework that work. The African Constitutive Act, they say that the African Union, they should stop the wars. The Organization of African Unity, they failed. So why do we have this, yet we have the African Union that came here to bring peace and security in our region? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. First off, I must say the reason why Africa is having the problem it has is because of its people. Period. I am tired of putting blames on colonial masters. When the British came to Africa, it was an African that sold his colleague African for slave trade. Do we agree on that? Can we first take responsibility for our actions before we start pointing fingers? Again, the line of action that we need to take, the people that run the economies of the world are not politicians. I'm tired of hearing sustainable development funds for these developments that develop all these terminologies. I love what the president of Uganda said at the Africa Summit a few weeks ago in Uganda. These are all jargons. Have you ever had any of these multilateral institutions say there is a development fund purely for foreign direct investment to revamp the private sector with little or no restrictions? Do you hear these kinds of conversation? Do you even see them promoting those loans or those schemes? Why are you not promoting it? But you are telling me as an African that my foreign reserve bank should be in Europe. It should be somewhere out of the continent. Who told you? Who told you you are less or value? Who told you you are underprivileged? All these terminologies, underdeveloped communities. Who told you are underdeveloped? You have uranium, you have diamond and bauxite, you're underdeveloped. Botswana, a community that I'm aware of that has major mineral production for diamond. They told the companies, before you establish a mining facility here, there must be a university, there must be a hospital, there must be infrastructure for the community. Everybody within this community has to go through educational system on your court. We don't need your money. We don't need these funds to come to central bank. Let them go through a proper schooling. Let them go through proper education. When they are done with that, they can come back and run those companies and those businesses. The first thing they did to us is to take away the civil education that we had as Africans. That's the first thing they did to us as Africans. And we acknowledge it because we continue in the same line step. Why am I to go study history and Latin in university for crying out loud when I need to be studying engineering to help improve on the economy of my country? We see how African women are trailblazers within the sciences. How many of us have consolidated and bring a unified unit to bring all of these women together and be the trailblazers within the STEM industry within the continent? You see people, look at what my brother was talking about, the housing. Just take that one project. I don't need to go and start my own housing project. Okay, my brother, come to Sierra Leone. There's land. What you need, work the government, get necessary paperwork, and start a project. That's what you call Africanism, or that's what you call Pan-African. But what you start thinking of first as an African is how to rip this man off, how to start making profit. You have not even started putting your hand on ground to get the work done. It's about getting your hands dirty. The revolutionization of the West is because there were people committed to ensuring that America should become great. The revolutionization of China is because China said we cannot be number one, but we're going to ensure that we are the second best and nobody should top that economy. And today America has the bold mind to go to China to lend money. You think they cannot do that in Africa? They did it. George Bush did it with Gaddafi. He did it because he was sustainable. We have several clear examples that are manifesting right around us. But why can't we just copy the right things? Instead, what to copy? The wrong things to unseat our leadership in the name of democracy. With democracy, which country have you seen? The United Kingdom, which colonized Sierra Leone. Who told you it was democracy that make them the great monarchy they are today? Who told you that? The America that I'm currently in, who told you it was democracy that made them today the way they are? They chose that 54 nations to come together and say we are going to be under one supreme federal leadership. We need to put the ego down. We need to understand it is economics that runs the world with 67 billion out of the 100 and something trillion dollars that is being revolved around the globe is being controlled by Israeli companies. How many companies are African companies that you can say are in the manufacturing sector, just taking care of our feeding? Just because Ukraine is at war, we cannot even have fertilizer. Do you know how embarrassing that sounds for a continent that is rich with minerals, with landscape, with rainforest? We cannot feed ourselves. I take Sierra Leone, for example, Sierra Leone, my country. Do you know how much rainforest that we have? Instead, we are bringing our youthful population. Everybody wants to japa, as Nigerians say. Everybody wants to go out. And you have to come here, start from scratch. The very things that you say you cannot do in Africa, but you're ready to do it down here in America. For what? Stay under the cold weather and deplorable conditions, and then you want to blame government? Take responsibility first for yourself. Take responsibility and take action upon that responsibility. Let us build empires through businesses. Let us build Africa brick by brick through business, commerce, through trade. The days of Shaka Zulu, you see that was one of the most valuable cultural traits wherein we did this inter-African trade. Somebody will leave the West Coast and go to the East and buy something unique and then bring it to this region and make money out of it. That's how you have ancestral trademark for billionaires within our history. But what the West did to us was to kill our history. We don't know where we're from. So how can you know where you're going? If you do not know the crux of who made sacrifice before you were born or before you came to earth, how can you understand the value supply of the richness of you being black? We see the value of Wakanda. Wakanda brought the Africanness back to life to tell us this is who we are. It's in a fiction, but this is what we portray, and this is what we can give to the world, and we have it. UAE has proved to be a living testament to the Middle East. When Dubai started doing skyscrapers and insane projects as doing the Burj Al Arab and Burj Khalifa in the sea, look at what Qatar is doing today. Look at what Kuwait is doing today. Look at what Saudi is doing today. But who became a trailblazer? Dubai. Everybody cannot say you are doing business now without not going to Dubai. It's not possible now. These people have oil, but what they did, they educated the people enough and tell them this oil is going to run out. Let us find something else that can sustain our economy. What was it? Tourism. And we have it. Look at, you and I know what we enjoyed at the UN NGO conference, just concluded in Kenya. The tourism that we enjoyed. We went to the safaris. We saw you saw wealth. That is wealth. You see white people paying their money to go down to Africa to go see lions. We need to value that. I'm coming, sir. Just to wrap up. That's a business that can unify the whole continent, tourism. Tourism can be a unifying force that can not only amplify our cultural traits, but also give relevance to our ancestral values, which needs to be embedded and valued in us. You can never see a Japanese woman dressed like an African woman whenever she's out. You can never see an Indian woman dressed if not in a safari or in an African regalia. We need to promote our originality and make it a marketable product to the world, because without a product, nobody needs you. You need to bring a product or a service to the world. And when you bring that, that's how you become valuable. And that's my point. We need to stop these handouts, projects, civil society movement. We need to start building companies, start building investment opportunities and unify them as a continent, not as Sierra Leonean, not as Nigerian, not as Kenyan or Rwandese. So until we have a sense of ownership that it can only be done by us, ladies and gentlemen, we'll still having this conversation. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your insight. So my brother from Wakanda area. So can you please tell us how, because we've been struggling with this conflict, endless conflict, immediate problem in Africa, but what kind of solution can you bring to the table now?
Thank you so much, moderator. I think this is an open call to the IBTK Foundation, the IOIC leadership, and also other civil society on the call. I think it's high time we start singing or stop singing standing on the premises while we're still sitting on our premises. Most of the time, we just say there are lots of problems that needs to be solved, but we need to start identifying that those problems. And one of the strategies that we see that can be employed is making sure that there's even a showcase of civil societies and nonprofit leaders, or even the role of private sectors. Because I remember there was a time there was a big partnership with the UN SDG and Microsoft, for example. So like on this call, for example, my civil society sweetheart, Lisiana Emakwa, will be listening. And one of the things is that a lot of us should be able to put our money where our mouth is. You know, how do we seek for this source of support without shame to making our continent greater? Like, how do we identify certain problems? So an example is like, how do we, even young leaders, use the most important days in our lives to celebrate the continent? For example, it's my birthday. I'm able to go into a charitable home, give the best of donations that I can have, and also see how to support that home, and also generating a media voice so that people can support that area. That's one of the basic things. Or how do we spotlight projects like Miss Jacqueline, a champion of welfare of the girl child who I met recently in Kenya? Our mission is to amplify the voices of girls and women in the Kajiado County, you know, where we have babies who are raising babies. You know, they want to be able to provide a facility for them to be able to see where people can get resources that even when these babies who are raising babies go to school, how do they get people to support them in looking afterwards the child, in making sure at least they're getting the basic education, in making sure at least they still do not go to an adopt a mother who is adopting them. At the end of the day, they become house helps. So we need to strategically be thinking of what are the programs or provisions that are made available. Who do we use as tools? Like a lot of nonprofit cannot even amplify the resources that they have. They don't have an up-to-date website. So you're even scared on putting your credit card to supporting any NGO or home because you're not sure of what you get out of it. Or let's make another discussion for another day's ACON's futuristic project that is not getting the kind of African government sponsorship or getting African government sponsor. Like a lot of persons see when a travel influencer went to the country recently and found out that the project is still on the same way it's being started. And this is something that has gotten a lot of media amplification. So how do we take this from? We're looking at strategies that involve green technologies. We're looking at promoting circular economics. We're looking at investing in renewable energy sources. Additionally, we're looking at involving local community in decision-making progress. How do we identify our government or local representative, our senators? Like, how do we work with them to say these are the things that we want to be able to tackle? How do the almighty formula on access to funding, helping NGO youth reps or youth representatives get to the conferences they want to be able to get their voices loud? And if they don't make it there, how do we support them to creating events in their own community? Like Success just went to certain communities, and for his own decision of not having the same resources that he would need, he wants to be able to continue with such projects. He doesn't just want to go do a photo hop in those communities and not being able to support them. So how do we change that? How do we use high-profile events like One Young World or the biggest conferences that happen across the world to use influencers like the Yemi Alades of this world, the Grammy Award-winning Burna Boys and the rest, to see themselves as speaking directly to government and also helping in the ongoing conflict that is happening across the various regions of Africa. So to cut the long story short, how are we also putting technology in the hands of people who are trying to seek employment? You know, there are programs like the Cyber Girls program, which is empowering young girls in cybersecurity initiatives. So really, there are problems that is happening in Africa. The government is not doing this. The government is not doing that. But how, as we as civil society advocates or people who are young professionals in private sectors, can use the resources that we have, that we can build a solution board with high-profile organizations like the IBTK Foundation, like the IOSC team leads, and also other relevant organizations in the continent to start spotlighting, to start using the media, to start putting their money where their mouth is, to get people who are also on this call, like Moses on the call is talking about the policy on economy in Africa and is sucking local investors. That's true, because there's now donor fatigue. There's no more GoFundMe except you're having cancer issues. So we need to be very strategic, and we can use the African nation as a soft board to even be able to have that visa-free economy that somebody mentioned earlier. And the government of Kenya has already started with their e-visas. So how do we encourage other African governments to do the same? Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. But I think I've been asking a lot of questions to young people, and I wanted
to chip in something to what Chase and Eunice said, if that's okay, really quickly.
Okay.
But to what they said and to your question, I believe that one of the first things we have to look at is how strong is our AU Peace and Security Council?
That's great.
We do we have one?
We do.
I mean, I know on paper we have one, but do we really have one? NATO is a coalition of countries' security apparatuses. How is Africa bringing different parts of their military to form an African Union Peace and Security Council and peacekeeping troops? I don't see that. The only time I heard or saw, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, an African country going to help another African country was Nigeria and Liberia, I think. I haven't seen another. And this was years ago. we have to be holding them accountable. Like member states in Nigeria, not in Nigeria, in Africa should be held accountable. Because why are you member states? Why do we have low or untimely response
Mhm.
to attacks? You know, there should be establishment of clear benchmarks and timelines for implementing peace agreements. There should be regular monitoring and reporting on progress by the AU Peace and Security Council. There should be sanctions or other penalties for non-compliance, because it feels like all the African leaders are doing whatever they want. They just wake up and play by ear. And so, how are we holding these people accountable? Because if we cannot have a free trade zone in Africa without proper peace apparatus in place.
Thank
If
you.
not, it's just a chaos. It's a breeding ground for chaos. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you for tackling that question, because for me, I was thinking to ask you the same question, because you said about the alliance like NATO. Because we are thinking about militarily. Why do we have to put militarily, let's say, measures more than, we actually try to influence the military action more than diplomatic or maybe decision making process, which we do not have, because we always say the African Union does not have permanent seat on the UN Security Council, which now I'm going to ask our very expert at the UN, who's been there for 30 years more, to tell us how she thinks, like, what are the internal limitations of African intergovernmental organizations such as African Union, and what are the external limitations of African intergovernmental organizations. So within these limitations, do you think the African intergovernmental organization, they are not fulfilling their purposes or their mission because they are not part of the UN Security Council membership? Auntie Hawa.
Is that for me?
Yeah.
So since I've retired, it means I can't be fired, right?
You cannot fire. You cannot be fired now.
I mean, they can try.
You
We
know,
can try. We're gonna speak.
I've been listening to this conversation, and I'm just like, Celine, they say, my hair is rising on my skin. I'm getting goosebumps because it's so
Oh.
interesting. It's so valuable. And, I'm thinking to myself, that's a good question you ask. And I'm just thinking, why are we not in the Security Council? I mean, everybody in the global South will say that. It's not only Africa. Our brothers and sisters in the Asia subcontinent are asking the same reason. Latin America, hermanos y hermanas, they're asking the same question. So, I mean, we're looking at a Security Council, uh, a slightly more global General Assembly, an Economic and Social Council that really reflects 1945, the power structures that were there in 1945 when the UN was created. And I think that we all know that the world has changed in so many different ways, superpowers, the economies that have grown, economies in transition, the communities in Asia, and I dare say some very powerful economies on the continent of Africa. I don't really know if I can answer that because it takes political will, I think, amongst us as Africans, but we can't limit it to Africa. I think it's the power of the global South that is going to push and make changes in international organizations like the Security Council, like the United Nations, I should say, but not even limited to that. Because I think we have that power, we have the resources, we have the minerals. Somebody said that before. We have the voting power. I don't even know what the population of Africa is, but I know that they're pretty, the young population is ballooning, and that we have the power to vote. So I don't know if it's a lack of unity, if it's a lack of confidence in ourselves. I don't really know if I can answer that question because I don't see any reason why it can't be done.
Mhm.
Why are we not there? Why are we bowing down to the superpowers that be, quote and unquote? Why are we not doing more? Why are we going with our hands open, begging? Why are we not making them accountable? for things that are happening on the international arena. Don't get me started, even though I can be fired.
No.
I see you holding back. I hear you holding back.
I still want to have friends where I just came from. So I'm going to ask the people who are in the audience, help me. Why, as Africans, why? That's why I asked you the questions. Is Africa being left out? Is the global South being pushed aside? Are we pushing ourselves aside? Are we limiting ourselves? Why? And what should we be doing? So I'm throwing it back at you, young people.
Yeah.
In
I
case I need a
mean,
consultancy. Over to you.
I wanted to mention something, if it's okay.
Okay.
Is it
Maybe
okay?
Sister, she wanted to say something.
Oh,
Vivi,
she
then
can go before me. It's fine. I'll
you.
talk after her.
Okay.
You're so kind. Thank you for giving me my power. I
Not
like
a-
I like that. I like when the men are supporting. You know
Yeah.
exactly what to do. It's interesting because I remember that at the last Commonwealth summit, Women's Summit, there was a question that I asked, and I remember asking that, when I look at the multilateral agreements that exist between all these countries, and I want us to remove it from the African context, when we look at the multilateral agreements that exist between, these are not only African states, so these are Commonwealth nations, everybody is coming to the table. What are we really negotiating for? I always ask, what are we negotiating for? Like, what's the conversation? Like, when we go into these rooms, what negotiation power do Africans actually have? Okay, fine. If we do not have a negotiation power, do we have a negotiation plan at the very least? Because I feel like somehow we go to these conversations to just contribute and say, okay, well, the final document comes out, the declaration comes out, all states have to do this. But what are we actually negotiating for ourselves? So I don't think I really have an answer, Auntie Hawa, but one thing I know is that we don't have a negotiation plan, or at least the very least talking points for the African continent. So when we go into these discussions to negotiate or talk about global issues, we sort of are on the short end, which sort of makes us, just say yes. Oh, that's true. That's happening in my country. And so, yes. So there's a difference between actually having a plan in our negotiating and actually be negotiating for things that concern us. If we go to the United Nations meetings, and I want us to use this clear example. We're talking about the African Youth, International Youth Conference, and Auntie Hawa asked, "Where's the Africa Regional Session?" That is what it is. It's as simple as, what are we actually negotiating for? So if we go to these conversations and we see that there's a lack, we get to ask the questions. We get to decide. And I always like how the AU works. I remember in 2014 or thereabout, there was a conversation that was talking about the grants and how, who was supposed to contribute more to the budget. And I remember, the big states, I'm not going to call Nigeria, but we're part of the conversation of, oh, we have the fuel, we can, you know, and then you have the smaller states like Comoros and the rest coming in saying, oh, no, wait, tell me what your GDP is again. So I feel like we never negotiate because we don't have facts and data. And I feel like somehow we need to start going with our conversation of, we have the population, we have the youth, we have the resources, we have the technology, we have the human capital necessary to achieve X, Y, Z. So now, because I have one, two, three, four, five, here's why I need to be here. We have conflicts. You tell me how many conflicts you have in your area. If I'm negotiating on the, United to have a seat at least at the UN Security Council, let's look at the conflicts. Let's look at the trends. Where are they? They're in Africa. How comes I, as an African, or how comes Africa doesn't have, an observatory? I'm just saying something like an observatory mission. Even if it's just that, where are we starting from? Because I feel like we forget the trends, we forget the power, we don't negotiate right, and it somehow doesn't allow us to have any say in when the UN General Assembly stamps, this is what we're going to be doing for the next year. So I feel like somehow we need to come to that conversation. And I'm glad that young people are here, because now, if we are part of these discussions, then we'll start asking the right questions. I feel like it. I really feel like we're on the good footing. And we can start negotiating to sit on these panels and sit in that council and actually create our own commission, if possible, fund it. I know it's possible. I know it's possible.
Absolutely, absolutely, Velvita. La luta continua.
Let's continue. My brother,
Victoria Asata.
I think
I
Christopher,
completed the sentence. Victoria Asata. Victory is certain.
oh,
I think Christopher has something to say because Christopher, we all just came from Nairobi, and as the Sierra Leoneans say, my mouth was full. My mouth was hanging to the ground when I saw the prosperity in Kenya. But I also spoke to a lot of Kenyans, and many everyday Kenyans were not, they didn't seem to be moving with the flow of the prosperity that we were enjoying as expats. Is that an issue for us on the continent? Things are moving, but the
Things
people
are
are not
moving, but the
moving
people are
along.
not moving along.
Yeah, many people are not, they're not aware of what is happening around them. And until someone from very far away comes and makes it aware that this is actually something that you can tap into, you can grow with it and even benefit from it, many people don't look at what they have. They want to be, they are cockroaches in their country, and then they want to go to another country to live and go to another country to become a lion, and they don't know the need to start where they are. So as Africans, and even as more or less like a Kenyan that I am, many homegrown initiatives don't work. People thinking that when they go away, the initiatives will be more stronger. So there is less value, less interest, lack of knowledge. Like my colleague Villeta is saying, that there is no plan, there is no information. You travel because you've bundled yourself in the suitcases and you have gone. Even the value, who are you? You're in those processes, but you don't even know who you are at the moment and what impact you can make. But at the end of the day, because you do not know yourself, someone else takes advantage of what you have. They take advantage of the information, they take advantage of your position, and even the resources that are around you. So that's why many people get surprised when people come from outside from the locations that they are, and they get a lot of benefit. They go and plan to come back to invest, they plan to come back to stay. Yet the people who are within that kind of vicinity, their eyes are not opened. And for some reason, they do not see, they do not interact with it. But there's more need to be done for us when we travel in those global meetings where decisions are being made, that you need to be also a decision maker at home. When you're a decision maker at home, you know how to equip yourself, that by the time you go outside there, the style that you used at home is what you're still using outside there. So when you see people outside there keeping quiet, just know at home, they're also quiet like that. And sometimes they have been made to be silent to an extent of even whatever they have can't help them by themselves. So there's more that is needed to be in education, taking advantage and knowledge of what is actually around us so that it can benefit us as individuals. I think that's my take on that.
I want to quickly say something. I think
Oh, wow.
the conversation, like we said, is taking a different tone. Like, so we're in two seats. The seat of there's a lot of problem, and another seat of what are the solutions, and if there are solutions, how do we keep them? So recently, Melinda Gates just announced our exit from the Gates Foundation, and she's putting a lot of resources into the space to support gender issues, women health issues, and all. But the question is, do we even have the capacity and resources to supporting stakeholders on the African continent to be able to get such funding? Recently, the US First Lady, Dr. G. Biden, also announced another amount of millions of dollars in research. The question also is, for African youth players, for African youth continent, do we even have that capacities in applying for those resources? Lisiana mentioned on the chat right now, she's talking about an Africa member state permanent seat. But the question, Auntie Hawa, my queen mother, a woman I love so much, is what is actually our focus about the UN all the time? What's African Union doing? Viban also mentioned it. Are we not tired of the dates? 2063, 2030, 2010, 2020. 2020 was the scariest one before. I didn't even know we were going to make it through 2020. But we're saying, as we have started this conversation, today is the 3rd of June. What is the next step we want to take in the next 1 week? How do we identify players in the space? How do I support VBAN in Cameroon or Success Project in Nigeria? How do people on the call be able to say, okay, oh yes, the African governments are doing a lot of BS. I want to support with my own $1, with my own ₦1, with my own 1 Kenya shillings. You know, I think I kept some Kenya shillings too. I would beg my mother afterwards. But the true picture is like, how do we begin to at least be part of this framework of the 2063, the Vision 2030? Like, we're leading to the Summit of the Future. How can we, as African youth players on the call, have this statement of document that says, these are projects that we want to be able to work on before the Summit of the Future, and also have the impact that we want to be able to share with? Are there consultants in the play that we want to be able to work with to be able to achieve those projects within those milestones? And lastly, how do we make sure that we can work collectively without you saying, okay, if you don't support my project with climate resources or your agenda, you are focusing on your own, we will begin to have this conflict within us as youth advocates. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like
very
to
much.
May I
interject real
speak now,
quick.
or
Okay,
Okay,
now
go ahead.
we'll
Success, go ahead.
this, then you.
okay? This one of the I'm going to talk more on what Chase said, and then I'll go back to what V and I were talking about. Chase, one of the biggest things for me when it comes to funding, I think that has been my biggest issue when it comes to community impact, is that a lot of people who apply for funding end up having to grease palms to get these fundings, especially in Africa. So you want to get, for instance, $1 million, and someone says, I can help you get $1 million, but I need 200,000 from that. If this project is 900,000, you already are operating at a loss. First, you're not able to carry this project out, and second, you're not able to pay the people, because of course you're going to pay people to carry this project out. For instance, if I'm going to do a slum rebeautification project, I don't know how to. I'm not an architect. I'm a project manager. I'm not an architect. I have to pay an architect to be able to design this. I have to pay people to come and lay foundations, for instance, to lay the base to drop these buildings, for instance. If I'm not able to have sufficient funds to break even before the funds even get to me, the project is already, like dismantled. And I think that's my biggest problem in Africa for this. Now, I don't know. I've tried doing GoFundMe before when I did a project in Brooklyn. This was 2021. And it worked-ish. I ended up, making it up with my own money, but it's also a good way to raise funds. So that's kind of what, somebody can brainstorm on how we can, solve this, because I have tried those different routes, and I'm hoping that there is a better way to do this that doesn't constantly have to go deep and burn my pockets. Talking about the P5, I want us to go back really quickly and look at why the UN was created. And I think if we're able to look at why the UN was created, we would probably stop bothering ourselves with permanence in the P5. I think that if we're able to figure that out, first of all, the League of Nations failed. The New Hampshire Convention in 1945 literally was, you people have failed, we want to start our own. That's how the UN came about. African nations were an afterthought. They were not priority to the UN at the beginning. The Bretton Woods system was thinking about North America and the western part of Europe. There was no thought about Africa. Africa was not even a factor because there were colonies. And so now they're throwing us bones and we are having like temporary seats. I think Nigeria served in 2014 and 2015. And I think now there's Sierra Leone, and there's one other country, I think, that's part of the temporary people on the Security Council. Yes, I'm correct. Sierra Leone and Algeria. They are the latest African countries to join the non-permanent members seat of the Security Council. I think Africa should focus more on strengthening African Union security. This was why I asked about accountability. How are we training our military in our various countries? Because they are not training them well. They are not. I'm not kidding. What they are learning is how to stand on the way and collect money from people. That's what they are learning. So they're learning how to what's it called? Oppress people, oppress civilians. The military are not supposed to have any contact with civilians except there's a terrorist attack. On counterterrorism matters or on border matters. You're not supposed to be out of your barracks. We're not supposed to see you except you're traveling. Africa needs to be very clear about what kind of security they want to postulate. Because why is China all the way from the east in the P5? They were not there. They were not thought about when this was created. They came in because what they brought to the table was economy. They had so much reserve that America could not fight them. What are we bringing to make these people look at us and say, oh, now we can be on the same level? Like, what are we bringing that they need so much? And we know that we're giving them all the things that they need to improve the economy in the West, but how are we protecting those resources? Because if we protect them enough for us to have a bargaining chip, then we have something to talk about. So I think we should stop bothering ourselves about being on this P5 seat and strengthening our own Security Council at home, because then we would matter on the global scale. Thank you.
Thank
So,
you very much.
so I wanted to add something, Mr. Moderator. I'm kind of 50-50 on that. You know, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to say the UN is a boys' room, right? Or a boys' club. And if you're not on the table, you're going to be eaten alive. So yes, we need to strengthen what is on the continent, but we need to also show up on the international level, at the international stage. So I think that, I don't know if Chase is agreeing or not, but we cannot say that we cannot.
I'm agreeing with you.
We should not challenge the P5 and take control of the mantle. Why can we not do that?
We cannot do that.
Not challenging, strengthening to be recognized.
Like you said, it's a boys' club. So how do you get to participate among the things that have already been created? Some young people like us think we can come into the space and change everything. No. There's certain rules that have been adopted. So, but how do we shape that?
I'm not sure who it is. There's a second mic.
Go ahead.
I think it's just he's echoing. Chase, you're echoing. I think that's it.
I think those who are not speaking should just put mic. But what I'm saying is like we said, from the conversation we even had yesterday, we have like a model figure. We have Auntie Hawa Diallo, 38 years in the UN system, understanding the rules, start as a UTOR representative, becoming different ecosystem from Cambodia to Kenya and the rest. But we as young people are not looking at the subject of message. This is somebody who has gone through this space. A lot of the time, we take on play cards and we just feel that we can change the policies. We can reshape the narrative. We can take on, like you said, you can't just come into the UN and take on the boys' room or say, okay, you want to create permanent seats. But we're just identifying the space. It's just an example. Like I said, I want to play the devil's advocate to success. You see somebody who's ready to give you $1 million and says he wants to take 200,000. And you're saying because you do not have the space of completing it as an architect, you would refund that amount of money. Young people need the capacity to understand, okay, this is something that is happening right now. I've seen my friend and colleague, Yunusa, who had gone to prison because he is willing to fight for something, he believes it. But a lot of us cannot take on that struggle, but we want to be able to start writing in papers, come in conversation, and start saying things that are not working. But we're saying, like Vivian has mentioned, what is the solution showcase? What are the problems identifying that Africans are dealing with right now? Funding, access to decision maker, and thirdly, how do we provide capacity for those who are working? How do we solve these three most important things and get the results done so that we can have a declaration document that says this is what we can solve? Because if we continue in this conversation, we would only complain about what the UN is not doing right, the African government is not doing right, what civil society are not doing right.
All right, I'd like to jump in real quick, Mr. Moderator, if I can. I think you're mute. You need to unmute your microphone, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for unmuting me. So I wanted to add something here, because when we are talking about when Success said about the African Union, we need first of all to see, are we first of all very well organized? Is the African Union well organized? So why do we need a seat? Do we deserve the seat? If we have this seat, what kind of influence do we have on the table? So this is number one, because we said, number one, we need to look at the internal arrangement, let's say the setting of African Union. These people who are leading the African Union, how influential is the African Union boss, let's say? How can he influence the president of Liberia? How can he influence the president of Rwanda? Can he ever say? This is the thing that we need. We need to see the leaders who are leading the organization, because the African Union is like, let's say, a driver of this Agenda 2063. So when we say that, let's see who are those. Let's say, okay, I can say it's an engine, and who are those drivers? These are the people who are working within the African Union, and these people, they are from the top level up to the grassroots level, let's say. When you look at the European Union, they have the European parliamentary system, that they have, each country has a member parliament within the African Union, the European Union. What about Africa? Do we have people? What about our representation? What are those people representing us in those organizations? So if they're going to go to the UN Security Council, what kind of decision are they going to take on our behalf? So we need to have representation that is really accurate, that is really, let's say, tangible, and also accurate. Because if you're going to decide on Africa, we need to have people who will tackle the problem of Africa, because they meet people, not people like, let's say, people who are sitting in Addis Ababa can decide on our behalf without going to the grassroots level and meet people. We need to have people who are representing us within African Union. And then these people, like our parliamentarians, they need to frame some policies that really, let's say, respond to our needs. So if we do not have that one, how will we go to the UN Security Council at the high level without having these small problems? Because some of us said, it's a Christabel, they say we need first of all to be responsible among ourselves. For example, if you're in a house, you cannot tackle a problem with your 2 children. I don't know how you're going to handle 1 billion people. That is actually what I want to say. Thank you.
Exactly. Mr. Chair, a quick one. I'd like to differ from what Chase is saying and what all of you are saying. I go back to product and service. China did not need any resolution from United Nations for it to become the #1 manufacturer of service delivery in the world. I'm sorry, sir. We don't need institutions or multilateral entities to run the continent. Do you understand that? Do we agree that I don't need to be at the AU for me to be a self-employed chief executive of my company to bring foreign direct investment to the Republic of Sierra Leone? Do you know I don't need a resolution to do that?
Thank you.
Also know that I don't need a resolution from the Africa Union to complement the Agenda 2063 in providing.
You need to have the Secretary General.
Yeah, the general point is you have to start. My point. You have to start with yourself first. I cannot say I'm correcting His Excellency Julius Maada Bio, my president, if I'm not complementing the national agenda for development in Sierra Leone. What are you crying him down for? What are you doing, sir? Why would I be a Nigerian and say Tinubu is stealing all the money? What money have you brought? Are you paying your common income tax, the local tax, to support the government system? Are you paying it? You don't respect the local income tax, but you are paying royalties to Commonwealth. You are paying royalties to foreign entities. Do you see the Chinese doing any of this? When the Chinese took up the manufacturing industry from America, and they say, America, we can do less labor for you, more affordable for you. We have the best iPhone. You can get it in America. We have an iPhone for Africa. Do you know why they did all of that? Just because they did their studies well. They realized that first you have to be informed. When you have the right data, you have the right information, you can make the right decision. Africans just gesticulate, and we need to stop that. We need to harness the unity of coming together and supporting an initiative. Typical example, I think it's in Mauritius, one of these North African countries, that it's malaria free. How many African head of state or ministers of health have held a conference in that country to learn how to make sure the entire continent is malaria free, which is a major health issue? That is one thing we can take as an example. This country is malaria free today. What were the best practice? What did they do? We had the COVID-19 situation. We had our own medical doctors, our own engineers that did a vaccination. We cannot even stand behind our own vaccination. But we saw how the Germans fought the Americans, the Russians fought them, amongst themselves, Pfizer and the other ones, for global market supremacy. It's all business and product and service delivery. Who told you they went to the United Nations for a resolution for that? So this is my point. It comes back to the crux of what do you bring to the table? And you bring it to the table, stop the mere talk. We don't need to tell UN Security Council to get us a seat, a permanent seat, if we have our own military bases equipped by our own African resources. But Kagame has been saying this all the time. Why do you need international intervention to talk to Somalia and Congo and all these other people to stop the madness? I've been a boy. Since I've been a boy, Somalia has been fighting. I'm now 30-something plus, fighting 30 now, and they're still fighting. Why can't 54 member states can talk to these people? Are you telling me there's nobody in Africa that can talk to the Congolese army and anybody involved that, sir, you have been killing lives, you have been taking lives for over 20 years, over 30 years? Are you telling me we cannot solve these common internal issues on a continent unless we need donor funding? Why should the EU fund the African Union? Have you read the charter and establishment of the AU itself? Do you know the instrument and the clause of the AU charter itself? But people just talk about this. They cannot just function without support from foreign entities. Why should that even be? Why should you have the foreign reserve bank for the continent, for crying out loud, in Europe? What are you doing it? You think America cannot build a bridge between Sierra Leone and New York? It's the shortest distance from here to across Atlantic. But they say, let us go through Europe. They filter us there as creatures before we go to America or go to Canada. Do you know why those immigration systems are in place? Do you know that colonization is just being modernized every day? But we are sitting down, we are clapping hands and complimenting the process. I'm tired of crying down my African leaders. They are doing their best as they can. You make shady deals on the room because the very people you are making deals for are not making the move. America, Joe Biden will not get up one day and say companies should just close down, because he knows that the economy of America is being run by private sector. You have to ensure that those entities are devoid of politics. Let us remove politics from our daily conversation. Why can't I have a clean conversation with somebody to do business without you asking me my ethical background, my ethnicity, or my political stance with you? And African leaders are trying the level best. I can give credit to so many. We are seeing Rwanda, where you're from. Paul Kagame has laid the foundation again for his country. You have seen Gaddafi. We have seen the North. So in as much we want to synergize and tell everybody to come together, we need to give them the reason why I should be valuable as a Sierra Leonean to a Rwandi, or to a Kenyan, to somebody from Morocco, for somebody from South Africa. And again, if you do not promote who you are and the value of what you are, we're going to continue with the scramble for Africa. That's what has been the challenge. It has been a scramble. They deliberately did what they did with the mapping, with the language, because they know if we stop talking to each other, if we stay away from each other, nobody can come here. Why would you want to have head of state summit and then you are meeting each and every one of them separately? Are we not one people? What are you telling me?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You have really schooled us and given us lots of food for thought. You definitely have my vote. I am a fellow Sierra Leonean, and I've been privileged to really see the growth in your work and to really see your passion and dedication, even in these couple of days we've been here in Los Angeles. So I really look forward to continuing this discussion, but also continuing some action planning with everybody that is on the screen. And I don't mean only the speakers. We have lots of valuable and dynamic young Africans and friends of Africa from Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, so many people that have been here, from Haiti, so many people who have been here with us. As we said, it's a global village. La lutte continua, et ça c'est pour tout le monde, c'est pas seulement pour l'Afrique. So, Mr. Moderator, I don't know how you want to proceed because we do have to wind down. Let's
Yeah.
kind of keep this together and start planning for IYC 10. And
Yeah.
as I put Elima, we need to have these conversations in our communities. Don't wait for the UN. Don't wait for African Union. Do not wait for IYC. Start to cultivate and to nurture these types of conversations in your communities. And please reach out to us. Each and every one of us are working with our respective NGOs, organizations. Some of us are in private sector or in academia. And let's see how we can support you in these conversations. Mr. Moderator, distinguished moderator, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. You know, we are blessed to have someone who has been there for decades, like 3 decades at the United Nations, and somebody who's still like, she's a youth, right? Let's say she still loves us. So we love you so much, and we are very happy to have you here. So you see, we have a lot of ambassadors here, but the problem that I need to challenge my brother before we go further. When we have people like Ambassador UNISA, when they go to parliament, they forget about all these ideas because they go like in enterprise. The government is like an enterprise. You cannot go to do your things. So you're going to follow the instructions, policies. That is the problem because, like always, when you see your teacher, they teach you how to make money, but they cannot make money. This is the big problem that we do have. So when you're in a class, you can always say, I will do that. But when you go to the field, then you say, now things have changed. The president have said. So if our president said something, we cannot say no because we need to respect our leaders. We need to respect the rules. And also, what I believe in Africa, what we need to be ruled by rule of law, not being ruled by law. Because if we're being ruled by laws, then we are really doomed, and then we will never achieve the Agenda 2063. So what I think here, what we need from now on, let us make Africa great again, as we always say, make Africa. Let's see, for example, I think once we have more than 3 people, we can make a great change. So let us try to see whether we can have a strong Africa network that will work for everyone, for all generations, not only young people, but all Africans. So coming back to this one, because we are winding up, and I think it will be one of the most important discussions that we want to have. If I may ask my sister, Christabel Opudo, from Nairobi, because Kenya is actually headquarters, one of the headquarters of United Nations globally. They have a role to play in global, let's say, global arena. So when it comes to Africa issues, you heard our friend, they said they need to apply for ETA to come to Kenya. They need to apply for the visas and anything that's really there. And also we had issues in Kenya also. They've been impacted by this terrorism attack. How do we really cope with this international regulation to make sure that Africa is abolishing this free movement of goods and services by implying the passport, the visa issues? So we make the country accessible to everyone. That is actually free movement of goods and services and people, but also try to maintain our regulations. So how can we, if you were to advise the president of Kenya or some of the president of Africa, how can you tell them to handle this issue to make sure that Africa is accessible for Africans?
Thank you so much. It will be important that I will highlight that what is currently happening in Kenya is not as a cause of what is happened because of poor leadership that was there before. I remember you are telling Ambassador that what would change if he comes into government and starts singing the government song. So this is what actually the president is now cleaning up. A lot of corrupted people who are drumming noise on how they think the government should be run when they were outside. But now by the time they come in, there's a lot of corruption to an extent that the resources cannot be are being misused left, right, and center. So by the time our current president was coming in, there was actually nothing much for him to use in the banking, in the pot that Kenya has all its money. So now what is being put in place is to have all the funds that are being collected as a nation to be in one pot. So in as much as it looks like internationally we are doing very well, For us now, we are learning how to put everything in one pot. We are learning how to pay taxes in Kenya before we start paying other taxes outside there. So there's more of unifying the income that we have within. And there's a lot of noise about it actually. It's only that maybe the international community is not aware, because now many people who are leading, who are in the position of leadership, they're actually making noise because they have been forced to put money in one basket. So then now you could request for it as from different institutions and government bodies and all that. So it will be more transparent to know who is taking what and where is it going to be. And like it was before, that everybody has got their small basket. So you see, this is one of the cleanup that we are doing as a nation that is really bringing a lot of stretch to us. And it is a lesson to the other nations, because if we are not able to do that, we will not be speaking one language. And you find that when it is being put in one basket now, people who are more skilled, people who are more educated, trained, and this is where now many people who are young are not just not the way African get leaders who are popular, but now we are getting more educated, trained, and professionals who can handle government matters to be part of it. So it is exposing a lot, it is streamlining a lot, but at the same time, I believe it's only for a shorter period, because he just took in the government just the other day. But soon we will be seeing more. So what's the lesson learned for the other nation? It's better to start early. Yes, you might want to go outside there to partner in A, B, C, and D, but unless you start home, you cannot know what is outside there, because the shoe pitches only the wearer. So it's important that many people, even for us that we are young people still following up, learn to fix what is at home than fixing what is outside. Corruption has also come into Kenya, just like we are here in other nations. But now we're even having our NGO registration board, our business registration board has been halted. All the companies, the NGOs that have been registered, they do not want pseudonyms, they do not want the beneficiaries whereby the front, either the young people or the front organization that have got people with the vulnerable people, yet behind the scenes, there are people who are getting big chunk out of the whole project. So there's a lot of cleaning up going on, especially here in Kenya. And I'm sure by the end of the year, things are going to be a little bit loose. In place, not actually loose, but who will be the beneficiaries? They're the people who want to see change. People who want to go now next and move the instruments that have been brought in to support the nation, to support organization, individuals into moving forward. So what is it for the other nation is cleaning up your scoffers, and corruption is a big word in Africa, but it starts from within us. But I'm sure with a lot of that, there's a lot of psychoeducation for what is happening. There's a lot of cleanup, and I'm sure we'll be forging forward. It's just a teething problem, but we are doing good.
Thank you very much, my sister. It's more about the knowledge sharing. It's about the experience. We learn from each other. One country learn from another, and you see how we can progress and make our continent a better place to be. Coming back to success, if you are to tell us in 1, 2, 3 sentences, for example, we said, I remember last time when the president of Uganda was in Kenya, he said Africa is like a house. And then when you go to Nigeria, it's like a bedroom. Coming to Rwanda, it's another, let's say, another small bedroom. And when you go to Sierra Leone, you see it's another, let's say, 7th quarter outside there. So why do we need to have a visa to enter our house? So do you think this, let's say, mindset or this narrative can work for us in Africa? And how can it work with in terms of security?
Well, first of all, we have to decide that that's something we want to do. And because I do not think that it is as complicated as we make it look. You know, that's why I was snapping my fingers when Unisa was like, was talking about China. The only thing China did was juice up their economy. That's it. We can just be known for one thing and have access to a plethora of other things. We can just decide to want to do it. It's as simple as a decision. And this brings me back to what I said before. How are we holding the member states of AU accountable? He mentioned how in Somalia, how can other member states not tell them stop? Like, this is done, you're done, stop it. How are we holding leaders accountable? And this also trickles down to grassroots politics. Are people actually the ones putting these people there? Or are these a select few that just have access to these seats and do whatever they want? Rule of law, not ruled by the law. Are we doing the things that the law states that we should do? Are we abiding by the dictates of policies that we have propounded by ourselves? How are we holding people accountable? Because if we don't go through these steps, stating that we just want to have free movement, how are we sure that other people from other countries are not going to come and mess it up for us if we're trying to fix things in our own countries? Because these are things that would go through the mind of a leader. If I'm opening my community to another community to have free access, how do I maintain the sanity within my community when this mix up happens? Accountability. So yes, it is possible. Yes, we can decide to do it tomorrow. We can start this process tomorrow. But this speaks to the strength of the African Union. This speaks to the ability of this, our union, strengthening our ties, having benchmarks and saying, these are the pointers, this is what states this, and then we're doing that. We have pointers to the things that we want to do and make sure every member state is following suit. And if we can get that done, it's easy to have free trade, free movement and free trade within member states, just like the EU. Yeah, thank you. So much in my head, but thank you.
Thank you so much, my brother. So thank you very much. Then I have to go to our sister in Cameroon, because we see, like in Africa, we say gender. I don't know in Cameroon how many women in parliament, in government, because we cannot take decision without including, our sisters, our mothers into the decision-making processes. So how do you think this gender gap can be tackled within the African Agenda 2063? And how do you think it can accelerate our vision in the way that we want it to be, in 1, 2, 3 sentences? Thank you.
Thanks for asking that. As a fellow gender advocate, I always say, look around you. I don't know if we'll be here if there were no women in the conversation, if there were no, I don't even think the human race will exist without a mix of a woman. And in no way does that we cannot collaborate, so that we cannot work. But I want us to come down to the human element of things. And I will come back to the fact that if we look at the people-centric approach, these are the people that make our economies. 75% of the food produce that we eat, say in Cameroon, is made by the hands of the rural woman. But only 10% of the businesses that are exporting these products are actually being owned by a woman. So technically, there's a gap somewhere. And if we're going by just those numbers, we can already clearly see that if a woman decides today, I don't want to be part of the food making process, by the way, which every human being requires for survival, it technically means that we're in trouble. So technically what this means is that we need to start looking at it as in, who are the people that actually make our existence possible? And where are they? Are they sitting in the conversations that actually concern us? If no, what are the numbers looking like? You clearly quoted Cameroon. Just as of now, we started doing, of course, the tokenism, but we're still working around the 35% in parliament, representation with women. However, how many of these women are actually sitting, either in the conversations that require us to pass the bills? Of course, there will be partisan developments. Everybody's going to and before you know it, it's probably about 2 of them that sit in the main conversation. So although we want representation, I feel like we're past the stage of just representation. We're past the stage of just, do it because it looks nice. We are in we should start having the conversation of, they need to be part of this discussion. They need to be taking decisions as well. So I don't see especially with the peace process and looking at how the conflicts have gone around Africa, women and children are the most affected. So how can we be making decisions around peace without including the women in the I don't see it happening. And I'm glad that you actually asked that, because I feel like we're at the point at a crucial level where let's agree that maybe our processes at the beginning were not working for us. Maybe we need to review who we are having on this table. Maybe we need to bring in different perspective. And once we start doing that, using our women, which by the way, I cannot overemphasize that is some human capital that we're just looking at. And if we're working at less than 50% of our potential, then we're obviously going to be reaping less than 50% of what we can achieve. So I clearly think that, in the discussions that concern the decision-making processes, peace, everything that concerns youth development, name it, all our policies that need to come out, women do need to be part of these discussions, because whether we like it or not, the effects and the outcomes of these decisions will affect them first and foremost.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I hope this will be insightful and also will be implemented in our regions and also our continent. So, my brother Chase, you were tackling the problem of malaria. You said like we should have malaria free on the African continent. But I think malaria has been there for decades, no solutions. Many people are dying of malaria. What kind of solution? Because when we say we want to have an African progress or African development, we cannot have a development without citizens. So we need people to live there where we need this development. So how do we tackle these diseases? Because during the COVID, most of our countries, they went through, let's say, a dark moment. Nobody knew what would happen. But now we learned that there are some diseases, some, pandemics that could even come later on. And why don't African countries, let's say our leaders, invest into technology, research actually? How many research centers do we have in our continent to see whether we can, tackle these problems like malaria and other diseases? Do you think it's going to be possible? And how can we achieve that? Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. I'm sure the malaria conversation will take on another 1 hour of conversation that we don't have today. But one of the major things I would like to highlight is tackling all of these things is about taking on deep-rooted societal norms and also making sure there are comprehensive policies that promote equal opportunities in education, employment, and political participation. One of the rule of law is you want to be able to identify the problems. So an example, during a lot of malaria-related programs that have been held by different programs like JCI, Junior Chambers, which I was part of in the past, you go into a community and they say, okay, we want to provide you borehole in this community. And the question is like, oh, borehole seems nice, but I need food first. I'm hungry, and one of the things that I want to be able to at least work with the IBTK Foundation and the IYC with a lot of the segment of the people we're having on this call is like, how do we have a solution showcase? Some of the things UNICEF have been able to educate us with, a lot of us are not even aware about it. For the malaria free, for example, what other country has done it successfully? What impact did they implement? What step did they take that we can use? The same thing for visa free. Which continent is using it well? Which continent has created an e-visa platform that we can use as a tool to guide others? Sanitary pad, for example, countries like Kenya or countries who have provided free sanitary pads, how have they done it differently that Nigeria and the rest of the world cannot do it? Employment, funding, we need to be able to at least start taking on this conversation one after the other, take on the things that these parliamentarians have been mentioning on the call, that they say, okay, we want to be able to use social media as a tool in facilitating all this work. So we need to be able to use that dashboard to have the solution showcase. And I'm employing IBTK Foundation, who is taking on some conversation in France and the rest of the world in a couple of months to be able to start taking on these solutions and sharing it in a larger world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother. So we know we are not taking this thing for granted. We have a lot of solutions. We have a lot of ideas. And then my brother here, Unisa, you were tackling things and saying that we Africa should not always complain and say that we need, like, let's say, a permanent seat. Who's going to give us the seat? And then what about China? China is one, let's say, one country, and then Africa is a continent with many states and also kingdom. Let's say Morocco is there like a kingdom. And then if we say that we do really need to have one voice, how do we mobilize resources? How do we also cope with all member states to come together? Because the thing is, when you look at the FTA, the free trade agreement, not all African countries have already ratified them. It's for Africa, but not all of them they've already ratified. And this is it is within the interest of Africa. And why do you think it will be easier for us to get one voice? Because at the UN Security Council, it's one country, one vote, one country, one voice. And then for us, Africa, 55 countries today, not say 54, 55 countries, how will we come together with one voice to make sure we are getting that seat? Because today, if we say we are going to the UN Security Council, Nigeria will say, no, we're the most powerful in terms of resources. And then we need to have that permanent seat. We're going to represent Africa. And then South Africa also will need that one. Don't you think there will be some conflict of interest for us to be there as a continent? So what can we do for us to be there as one continent with one voice? In 1 minute. Unmute.
Stop asking to get a seat at the table. Create your own table. Stop asking for a seat at a table. Create your own table. Okay? You want me to value you? You want to know the value of what I'm doing? Come to my country. When you come, it's very simple. Africans say we cannot get up and say all these foreign missions that we have from member states that are not helping us the way we want them to help, leave our country. They will bend to your will. Why would you need 54 or 60 or so member states from Commonwealth just coming together and then fly to London to sit at a church service in honor of a king or queen? Why can't he fly down to your Independence Day to do the same in retrospect? It's because of how you position yourself. It's about positioning, okay? And when you position yourself with the right information, information is power, okay? It's based on data. That's why they were able to manipulate us and get us the way they got us. So now we have realized this. Thank God to social media. Thank God to IYC for this platform. This is a starting point. We are talking it. Let's get to the action point. He said, Success said, I'm doing infrastructure development in housing. I want the next IYC, let's see what real estate he has started, even if it's 4 house. It was a start. How can we replicate that 4 house across 54 member states? 54 youth entrepreneurs can come together and work with him and replicate the same initiative, and that's how you expand on a housing project. If a Chinese investor wants to come in, he will have to understand the crux of the matter that, sir, we as Africans has to be first and second person in this business. You are coming in as a third. But no, we have always sold our positioning to foreigners. And again, I'm sorry to differ from what Chase said with regards to funding with the Bill and Melinda Gates and all these other people. These are all strategies to lower us into trouble. I experienced it firsthand under President Nkrumah with Ebola. When the British came in with the money, it was their kids that wore military combat that came here to fight. What did they fight? They were on vacation during COVID-19. I mean, during Ebola, they were doing vacation in Sierra Leone, not fighting COVID. We had to put down our resources. Our people were dying. So instead of we continue to blame people, our president had to find a solution to say, you know what? It's not the British that are dying. Let's find a way to resolve this sickness between Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and let's find a way to stop it. And we took action. We saw the results, and today we are free from Ebola. So these are all the things. President Bio did not wait for international fund to shut down Sierra Leone to combat COVID-19. Let us stop this preempt always. We are just waiting for the next incident, and then we'll start begging. We are not an incidental continent. Stop that kind of mentality. I love the Chinese. I love Asians because they are intentional about what they do. Look at India. You talk of the best medical doctors and surgeons today. They chose to educate their girls and young men in the sciences. So when you go to London, you don't find a British surgeon. You find an Indian surgeon. That's how vital they are. So for Rishi Sunak to become a prime minister, it's not magic. It was somebody. It was a benchmark for the whole United States to look at Donald Trump with all his troublesomeness and giving power as commander-in-chief, is because that man was intentional from the inception of him being the billionaire. He was self-employed. That's why he could talk to anybody at any time about anything. You cannot tell him nothing because he got his own money. Let us start talking about what do you have. This is Sierra Leone, and I'm amplifying the Republic of Sierra Leone at every given point. I say, I go back to Sierra Leone. I ensure I don't only talk about people or I talk about the problems my president and the government is faced with. I bring solutions. When I was when I came from the Harvard meeting a couple of months ago, I went to North Carolina to talk to investors to come to Sierra Leone. The diaspora has got the money. Our brothers and sisters here want to come back home. But if we do not create an avenue for them to link back to their ancestral roots, instead, we continue with this doctrine of the West. We are doing ourselves, and we should stop the complaint. I am tired of listening to complain. Take action, no matter how small. That is my message throughout IYC. No matter how small, take action. And the only way you can compliment a government or you can hold a government accountable is when you yourself has take a deliberate step to say, I'm correcting your action with this little movement. Christabel is here. She's doing tourism. Okay, if tourism is not properly done by the National Tourist Board in her country, she has a travel agency or tourism agency. She can pilot tourists to come into the country and do tourism program. And if she's doing it in millions, I guarantee you, either she gets a political appointment or the government's got to ask her, can we have your expertise on how to revamp our tourism sector? But all the time, we're looking for workshops and conferences to go to learn what? What do you want to go and learn in conferences? 3 days, you go stay in a hotel, you are eating. How would you take 3 days information to revamp an economy? How do you take a 3 days conference to revamp do you think I'm here for casual to go and see the LA Hollywood? I'm here to ensure that Africa amplifies its voice and we take responsibility and take ownership to what we want to do. And why Diallo did not just resign from you and she should be on vacation. She could just go to Bahamas or go to Maldives. It's her private life. She has given 38 years of that to society. And what has been the profit? But yesterday, she's still sitting here 2 hours plus or 2 hours and counting to discuss issues that are pertinent. Let us stop looking out for funding. The fund is in the continent. Create the funds from yourself. I cannot tell President Bio about funding crisis. I am not doing anything. When we had the Kush pandemic, the drug crisis in Sierra Leone, I work with the South African High Commissioner, an African lady who saw it passionate enough to work, Madam Grace Mason, Her Excellency Grace Mason, to address drug abuse within the upcoming generation. And we're currently fighting with other partners to combat the misuse of substance in Sierra Leone. Take action. That's my bottom line. Take action. Stop the complaint. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. It's really insightful. I will have a say at the end, but before we go further, I think our mother Aunt Hawa could have a say and try to give us advice on how she wants us to be within this community. Thank you.
Honestly, the mantle has been passed on to everybody that's on this screen. And I don't have much to say because I think the best is for people like me to continue supporting the work that you're doing. And I won't take a back seat though. I'll be just beside you. But I think the power is in your hands. It always has been in your hands. Count on me to continue advocating for you. Count on me to continue pushing forward your positions. So over to you because the world is in your hands. Thanks so much to everybody. It's been really a great conversation. I want to see us continue going and really working towards IYC 10. I see that the women in the room have left because it is quite late where they are. But again, I want to leave saying that the discussion has been lively. But I think also I want to thank the women who have been in this conversation because I myself, I always say I'm standing on the shoulders of very strong African women who have made me who I am. So I'm counting on our African brothers, but especially our African sisters and friends who have joined us here today, towards making the continent that we know that we can have. Asante sana, merci beaucoup, thank you. I look forward to seeing everybody soon. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much. For me, it was a very great honor to address our continental issues, and I think we have a lot of things to discuss, a lot of things to share. As I saw here, many comments. Some people they say we need to have this kind of discussions. So I hope that this is just the beginning, and then we'll have more and more. Because reflecting on our discussions, I'm reminded that there's a proverb of Africa where we say that if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. So if we go together, we'll reach there. So where are we going? We are going far from where we want to be. But I think by 2063, some of us won't be there, but we know that we are building something for our future generation, because we said we do not have to have strong only leaders. We need to have strong institutions. What institution do we leave behind? How is IBTK going to stay there for other generation? How is the African Union we talk about is going to be an African Union that really serve Africans? How do we want to have the international community to serve the people? It's all about this, because most of us, we see that these institutions, they've been there for years. It's because they had this strong framework that they built. So for us also, for us to have an African platform, an African diaspora, let's say we are diaspora here, we can work with the people in our community who are living in our countries, then we can build something that is African continent. We are going to look for something that we can call this, and then make sure that we have something that is better than ever. And I think this is the platform that is going to open for us the doors. And I think within this platform, within these discussions, we can have a lot to say and a lot to write, because I think it's not about only talking. We need also to write some people that can read what we said about. So I think it's really important for us to sit together and draft something that can impact the future we want. Thank you very much. I wish you a great day and a great evening.
Thank you.
Ready?
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day, people.
Jamba.
And if you have some spare money, if you have some spare $10,000, let's do this project together.
Wait, 1 minute, 1 minute. We need to have, are we committing to have a strong African network, or Auntie Howard, give us what do we say? Is it we commit? No, we commit for UN. For Africa, what do you want?
One Africa.
For Africa, we take action. We have so many networks that are not taking action. We take action.
So what is our hashtag? Hashtag take action Africa.
We take
hashtag
action.
take action
United
Africa.
Hashtag
Okay, wait,
United
we are
Africa.
united already. No, we bring something new because everything has been said. So let's start from ours to make a change.
We take action.
United Africa.
All right. What about you? Success.
Oh, I said take action. Hashtag take action Africa. That's it.
Action. My
We need
sister
action.
Vivi, what is your motto here?
My own will be Africa Action.
Africa Action. Auntie Howard, are you with Africa Action?
I'm siding with the women.
Okay.
Africa, where is it? Africa take action.
I mean, women
Of
have
course.
too. Africa Action. I love
Inclusive.
women. And women action.
So everybody who's on the screen, you can help us out also. All this discussion is going to be on the IYC portal. So help us vote. We have hashtag take action Africa and hashtag Africa take action. Is that it?
Yeah, we say United Africa first, but Africa Action, because I'm a lover of women's words and all. So Africa.
It looks like IYC for Youth already says take action Africa.
Thank you very much.
So we're
These
gonna
people
rely on our
coming?
brothers and sisters online, and we'll check this in a couple of days. But again, on behalf of IYC and IYC 9, I really want to thank everybody for giving us your time, your patience, your really dynamic, innovative suggestions and ideas. I'm leaving here really full of passion, of commitment, and really being inspired to take that action we're talking about. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye. See you in New York.
Bye.
10.
See you in New York.
See you in
Bye-bye.
See you in
France.
September. Summit of the Future. See you in France.